Good morning. My name is Tasha, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the CA Clarity Global Community Fall Webcast. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. Karen, you may begin your conference.
Thank you, Tasha. Hey, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. This is Karen Beaudouin. Welcome to the Fall Webcast. This is our last, I guess, third of the year, and we're moving on to the fall time. So it's a time of looking back and seeing what we have and looking back at 13.2 and some of our best practices for moving to Clarity in terms of portfolio work, and we're very, very pleased to welcome Bill Yee from CA Technologies and David Werner from CA, as well as a number of their co-workers. Unfortunately, today we also had Mike Thibault on the call to present today. Unfortunately, he could not join us today, so Mike's presentation will occur in the final webcast of the year. So I thank you all for joining. We have a great number of folks online today. We look like at 145 right now, which is a good number for us. So thank you all for dialing in. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to David Werner. Dave, thank you very much for joining us today, and please go right ahead.
All right, thank you, Karen, and thank you to all of you for allowing us to be on this call today and to take you through this presentation on Clarity portfolios. And I see, actually, on a housekeeping note, Karen, you made me presenter, but I don't see my deck of slides. Chris, can you give me some advice on how to pull it up?
David, should be at the top there. There's portfolio best practices.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so you all can see that slide now?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Sorry about the distraction there. You know, what I wanted to do to start with is introduce some of the other people from CA that are on the call, and I'm just going to give some introductory remarks and then hand over to Bill Yee. And so Bill Yee's on the call. He's in our product management group. You've heard from him before, and he's going to take you through really the bulk of the presentation here in terms of what is in 13.2 portfolios. And then we're planning a good amount of time for Q&A. And we want to hear your questions about this and be able to answer them. And we have a few other people on the call that I think will be familiar voices to you. So one is Denise Brown, who has been around Clarity a lot of years, designed a lot of content for us, worked with a lot of you, so I'm sure she's familiar. And also Patty Lotvola, who many of you have worked with in our pre-sales organization. So between Bill and Denise and Patty, we have really 3 experts here on portfolio management who we think will be able to answer any questions you have about moving to the new portfolios. And you know, what I wanted to start with before I hand the call over to Bill is to give a little background about why we redesigned the portfolio management in 13.2. I thought it would be it'd be helpful to understand why we made this strategic shift and why we went through all the work to really redesign portfolio management, because if you're not familiar with it, what we did with the 13.2 releases is we really rewrote how portfolio management works in Clarity. So it wasn't just a little update here and there. It was really a rewrite of it, and we did that for a number of reasons. And I thought before we get into the details of how to move to the 13.2 portfolios and what they're about, I thought it would help to take a few minutes to explain why we did that. So to start with, it really comes from a need to align your business goals with your portfolio. And this is something that has been really gaining momentum, I would say, in the last couple of years with analysts and with customers, and it is really an important shift that is going on in the PPM space. And in particular, this is coming a lot from Gartner. If you have read or heard anything from Gartner in the past year, for sure, from Gartner, they talk about this a lot. In fact, at the Gartner PPM Summit that they had, they do 2 in the spring every year, and they had one in Washington, D.C., they had one in London. I was at the one in Washington, D.C., and they talked about this a lot. Dan Stang, who's their main analyst for PPM, talked about this quite a bit. And the idea here, and what Dan Stang talks about when he talks with his PPM customers, is that he talks about how it was just maybe a few years ago that you bought Clarity to do governance of your projects and your portfolio and your costs and your resources. And what Gartner is saying now is that governance really isn't enough. It isn't enough for you to just have a good handle on what's going on. You need to be able to drive what your business wants in that portfolio and be able to make that connection. And one of the things that I just mentioning here that I was at the Gartner Summit, right after I left a presentation with Dan Sting where he talked about this, I ended up having a conversation with someone who was not a Clarity customer, but owned a PPM system. And really, we got to talking about the presentation, and she was telling me how that resonated with her. That was exactly her issue. She said, I feel like with our PPM system, we have a good handle on what's going on. We know what our costs are, our resources, and what our project status is. But we don't really have a way to align that with what the business is asking for us. So there's a disconnect there. So why that builds into why we redesigned portfolio management is that we looked at what we had already in portfolio management and how it was being used by our customers. And what we determined was that we weren't really going to get to a place where we could help our customers really make that connection with the executive level and the business needs with the portfolio management we had. We needed to really redesign it and really take even a larger view than that. And so this slide I wanted to show here, this is a concept that's been coming up a lot in Gartner, well actually now in Gartner, but it started with Forrester and their take of the PPM space. And they introduced this concept of above the line and below the line. And so if you haven't seen this already, what this is about is that line is basically portfolio management. So above that line, that's your business executives, that's your business drivers of what's going on in terms of project execution. And then below the line, that's your project execution. So that's where if you're an IT organization, your IT team lives. That may be where your product development people are. Basically the people who are executing on those projects. And that line, of course, represents portfolio management. So what we looked at in terms of our own Clarity usage with all of you, and what we were able to determine is that I think it's fair to say in the past with Clarity, we've struggled to get above that line in terms of really getting executives on board with Clarity. Certainly we've had issue with executives having access to Clarity. Oftentimes that's just shared, that data is shared through reports or other exporting that you all are doing. But we struggled a bit, and some of that struggling was due to ease of use and the functionality we had in portfolio management. And what we found is that we really needed to build more in to be able to build more usage and more value to the business drivers in portfolio management, and that they really needed more of what-if type of analysis and certainly better, easier to use functionality. And so that's a part of what we are doing in portfolio management in our changes here, is to add more business value, make this more valuable and easier to use at that business driver level, helping you to get better connected with what those business drivers are and align with the business needs with your project execution. And our hope with this is that actually makes Clarity more valuable to your business. So the more it gets connected with what your business needs from you and your executives, the more valuable Clarity is for your business, and it's not so tactical, it's more strategic. And with that, that's why I wanted to show one more slide here, which is the new portfolio management we've put together is really part of an overall strategy to help you get more strategic value out of Clarity and not just be limited to tactical usage. And we know many of you are using it for strategic purposes today, but what we're hoping is that what we're doing can add more to that, make that easier to do. So the new portfolio management we have, and what Bill's going to take you through in a few minutes, is part of that story. Another piece of that story is Clarity Playbook, and you've probably heard some about this already if you were at CA World or you've been on our roadmap presentations, but we've released already our first version of Clarity Playbook, And what it is intended to do is it does a couple of things that I was talking about that have been challenges for us in the past of getting above that line. For one thing, it connects in better your executives and your business drivers into Clarity by means of just them having access to that in the form of an iPad application and kind of an easy dashboard view. So it puts that in their hands, it shares that data, and that helps to drive things above the line a bit. But it's also about executive planning. So that way those drivers can do their own planning, their own executive planning of what those business plans are, and then be able to connect that down into Clarity in the new portfolio management, and then do the what-if analysis of where should we invest, how are things performing. And the overall intention here, and why I wanted to take you all through this, is that this is the overall, it's part of an overall strategy. So we didn't just decide, oh, hey, let's rip out portfolio management and change it. It's part of an overall strategy that we have in mind to help you get more value from Clarity and to be more strategic. And again, it's part of what we're doing with the Clarity Playbook application as well. So with that, hopefully that is some good background here and hopefully some explanation as to why we got to where we are with 13.2. And with that, Bill, I think what I'll do is I'll put your first slide on, and then I'll make you the presenter, and I will hand it off to you. So go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. So appreciate the segue here. I think it's fine here at the presenter area. So I first want to cover, let's give you a high level right now on our top-down portfolio management. So one of the main areas you see, what you're seeing in the screenshot is our waterline view. And it allows you to rank and do your planning as part of your investments. So what you see above the waterline is what the investments that meet your costs or capacity targets that you have specified. And things below is where it doesn't meet. So you can dynamically see what's in line with your costs or low demand or both, and what's below it. And we also allow kind of ranking rules. We'll talk about in later slides, and where it helps you allow you to rank these particular investments in the side of this waterline. You can move waterline. You actually can move investments up and down, above and below the waterline as you're going through in a very interactive fashion. With that, it helps you assess how you're looking forward regarding constraints, budgets, resources. The goal is giving that interactive view and seeing what happens, and and as you're looking through your portfolio, where you stand. And we like to say, hey, it's a way of kind of comparing kind of the reality to plan. So the goal is helping to planning your investments and see as part of your portfolio where you're in line and what you're not in line. So, but this could kind of give a high level what we have. The goal of my presentation now is how do I get to this waterline view? What are the things I need to set up, think about, some other kind of tips as part of it. So that's just what I'm gearing this presentation for. It's some help for the business analysts out there for managing, setting up the portfolio, but also people actually configuring as well. So we'll have some information for everyone there. So with that, let me move through it. What I wanted to cover as a start off is to kind of compare what's 13.2 versus 13.2 to give you some context and kind of understand what has changed, what is different, to give you some background. So first thing I want to kind of start off is the architecture. Pre-13.2, we're not able to edit specific areas of the portfolio, and what it does, it actually accesses the investment tables directly, and it was it did things in that area where it was sort of a performance hit in terms of getting it, and also too it didn't give you much flexibility in terms of editing. And so what we've done in 13.2 is within the investment tables, take a copy of that, and then within those portfolios, you can actually manipulate and edit areas of the portfolio plans to do that. And we did it for performance reasons and also better for usability. A lot of times it carried over information that it didn't need to or it wasn't required. That was part of the investment. So you'll be able to, we'll talk about it later in the slides, and where you can go ahead and tailor what that information you want to have as part of the portfolio. So One of the other items we want to ask, how do you do what-if planning? In 13.2, we called it scenarios. But in 13.2, we called it scenarios. And 13.2, we called it plans. And in addition, as we mentioned before, with the plans, we'll go a little more detail. How to edit and do that as well. So we'll talk about that more. There's no line of ranking inside pre-13.2, but also, and that's one of the main features as part of 13.2, is the ability to rank, do ranking rules, moving investments up and down along the waterline from there. The ability to add the information as part of it, of investments to the portfolio. They're both the same using the contents editor, but I've added a note for 13.2 is that we now, in that view where you add individual investments, we made that view configurable for the filtering and also to the list view there. So keep that in mind when you're going through, you can actually configure that area to better tailor for your needs there. Controlling of the attributes displayed in the portfolio. That's what I kind of mentioned before, is that pre-13.2, it carried over a lot of different attributes that wasn't even needed as part of the portfolio. And it actually, in terms of the performance and the refreshing and the things you have to do, it kind of bogs down. So what we've done is that within 13.2, you're able to control what attributes you want to have as part of the portfolio. And to do that within those, in the portfolio investment object, you need to register what objects you want to have as part of the portfolio. And I recommend you doing that. You want to, definitely if you just tailor your, to the attributes you want to have, you're going to have better performance in areas of. We'll talk a little bit about the syncing as well, because as we mentioned as part of the architecture, we grab a copy of that investment data, fit into those tables. We can sync it. And you have control on how you want to sync it. And you move sort of the attributes you don't need as part of the portfolio, increase performance of the sync job that you have to do there. So the different portfolio costs and benefits. Pre-13.2, it's the plan. It's on the plan costs and plan benefits. One of the key items is not time phase. This is a fixed value to have. In 13.2, it's about the total cost, total capital, and operating costs. The key item is that this is time phase, and this is based on the targets tab, if you've seen it already, and we'll cover a little bit more. You have the time phase that data, how you want it, see how it meets based on, say, your capacity versus your demand, or your total cost and what you have as part of your investments. For the kind of role capacity, same thing, is that it's defined by role, but it's not time phase. And in 13.2, it's more about by role, but in total. I'll go a little bit more in detail, but it's actually more the grouping and the totals that you have as part of those roles. And we'll tally that up and send that up to the portfolio. But the role capacity is time phase. So the kind of the key items with the portfolio costs and benefits and the role is that it's time phase inside 13.2. Now, one of the new benefits that we've added as part of 13.2, you may not necessarily know, is from the portfolio data provider. Now, people have worked pre-13.2, the portlets and the data providers are limited to a single portfolio, and it's only limited to the portfolio data. What we've done in 13.2 is that now those portfolios and portlets for the data providers can be used for a single portfolio, or can use across multiple portfolios as well. You can kind of go ahead and use that, maybe create a dashboard tab outside the portfolio and manage it that way, and creating those, using these data providers. In pre-13.2, we had investment data providers. They had specific ones one for asset application, what have you. But it did include the capital and operating costs, and it did include kind of the role, capacity, and demand. What we've done in 13.2 is that these data providers don't have portfolio data, but also investment aggregate data. And we'll cover this in more detail later, but actually you're able to find costs related for the life of the investment and bring that up inside the portfolio just to see and look at it as well, because within portfolios, similar to pre-13.2, is that you set it between the start and end dates, and the totals kind of clip based on that start and end date of the portfolio. But you may want to look at data that's outside that, or the aggregate data, the investment, for comparison. And in those different providers, we provide that. In addition, we add the operating cost, role capacity, and demand. And one of the new features that we added for 13.2 is the chart grouping. And the goal of the chart grouping is that a lot of times, within your building charts, you have to go into NSQL to build a lot of your charts, because the ability to group by a particular, say, dimension, by say by goal or by a particular investment type, you had to go to the NSQL level. Now you do this within the configuration of the chart. And we'll cover this in more detail later. But a lot of things you had to do in NSQL, now you can do just within these data providers. So it provides a lot of things out of the box. The last item here is about the NSQL kind of portfolio construct. There was a construct called investment_SQL. And to get a lot of the data and the portlets you had, you had to use this construct. Well, it's not in 13.2. So if you try to use some sort of portlet from pre-13.2 and move it over to 13.2, it will not work. So we removed it. But that said, we've done a lot of improvements within the out-of-the-box data providers that you see no need to actually use this investment SQL construct. So with that, I wanted to now let's kind of cover a little of the basis and understanding of how the step of portfolio. So here is a screenshot of the properties page of a portfolio. So in terms of edit access and view access, is driven by the manager and stakeholder fields on the properties page. So the managers have edit rights. So as soon as you add a person to it, to the manager's field, they have edit rights to the portfolio. And if you edit the resource to the stakeholder, they have view access to that portfolio. And note that once you assign them either manager or stakeholder, they're able to view all the investments within the portfolio. So it's not that you have to go out, give them rights to the individual investment to go see it. So once they're, assigned to manager or stakeholder, they'll be able to view all those investments within the portfolio. Some things to keep in mind. The new feature, also part of the portfolio is now we have an OBS that you can assign to the portfolio. So if you use OBS security for it, controls the access to the portfolio. So who can get inside this particular, portfolio instance. But it doesn't control what investments that are actually displayed or viewed for it. So keep that in mind as part of planning. You can use the OBS as part of reporting, and obviously also too for security as well. What we've added as part of our PM4 Accelerator, additional views, and I've kind of highlighted up above the analysis, capacity, and financials. And it's set under this under the properties where you can set the dashboard view. Definitely, if you're going to be using portfolios, I highly recommend getting the PM1 Accelerator, installing it, and looking at these particular, these tabs and the different portlets of the content that come with it. And within that content, it will add this particular portlet pages with these tabs. We'll cover a little bit more in detail in later slides, but it has a lot of beneficial content that you might need out of the box that you won't need to recreate yourself. So definitely look at that and utilize that when you're planning to use portfolios. So best practice for portfolio plans. So one thing I kind of want to note is that, do you need to use plans or not? If all you want to do is just to look at your investments and gain visibility to see if the capacity and budget are online, you may not need to use, if that's all you want to do, you may not need to use plans. But if you want to look at, say, different capacity targets or different budget targets, different costs you want to have, then you might want to use plans. So, and you can choose either the cost, benefits, role, what have you. If you want to do that what-ifing, then you definitely want to use plans. We have a screenshot above and where you see, similar to how in scenarios and where the yellow up top lets you know you're in a particular plan for it. And one thing to know about the plans that you have inside portfolio, they are not required. So the look of it looks similar to cost plans. And as a best practice, you may want to look at to see, look at creating all your portfolios. Do you want to define a plan of record for all your portfolios, or do you not? We recommend that you either decide to always define a plan of record, find a bracket for, let me step back, define a plan of record for all your portfolios, or don't define it for, for some of them. For in general, you shouldn't have a mix of portfolios that have, plan of record or not, because it will kind of mess with some of the reporting that's part of the PMO accelerator. And well, as part of that best practice, choose to see if if you want to have a set of plan of record or not for the portfolios. But don't either do one or the other, but don't do an extra of it. So you could throw off some of the reporting that's common to content in PMO accelerator. So in these next three slides, as we mentioned before, where as part of the architecture, we grab the information from the investments, put into to the portfolios kind of staging tables to do the planning as part of it. So what is the data you need on the investment to order, the proper data to get the costs, the resources, or any kind of measures or metrics that you want to have? What do you need to do on the investment side to get it inside the portfolio? So these next three slides are going to cover that. Let's cover the cost area. So in order to kind of display the capital and operating costs of portfolios, you need to have the planned capital and operating costs defined at the investment level. So there's two ways of doing that. One is if you look at the second item, it's the investment property financial summary. We used to call it the simple budget, as you can define those values there. Or you can do it at the cost plan. One of the key items is that you need to have a grouping attribute for cost type, because that gives you the whole planned capital and operating costs that that gets propagated up to the portfolios. So one thing to note is that if you're using charge code for capitalization, we have, as part of 13.2, a migration job. And what it does, it maps the charge codes to charge cost type on existing investment. It's called enable capitalization. I know that it's part of the PPM administration guide. Definitely take a look at that if you're using charge code. But this handles costs. So what about low demand and how you get that in portfolio? So you need to have team allocation set at the investment level in order for that information to get pulled up inside portfolio as part of the sync job. One thing to note is that the role demand is grouped by the team investment role to the portfolio. So say, for example, if you look at the screenshot, we have 3 architect roles as part of it. So, and there's allocation for those 3. So what it does, it takes those 3 architect roles total, role demand totals, and groups that, and that group total is sent up to portfolios for them to use within portfolios. So we covered costs, we covered demand. How do you bring other information inside the investment that you use within the portfolio? So out of the box, we've added other areas around, say, risk, business alignment, approved status, and also the goals. And these come out of the box part of the PMO accelerator. And we show you where inside, as part of the source area, I'm not going to read these, that you go ahead and define these. As part of in the portfolio. So when you define them at the investment level, display inside portfolios. You can also add, bring other custom attributes as part of the investment and bring them up as well. And if you want to look at it, if you're looking at it across, say, if you're using more than just projects as part of your portfolio, it's probably best to put some of the other metrics on the investment level. So we apply to, say, the investment object. So we apply to your projects and your non-project resource investments. and then you can use that to roll up into portfolios. But in order to see it in portfolios, you have to add that attribute as part of that registry. So it's an extra step in order to see it. So if you go under the portfolio investment object, add that as part of the registry so you can actually see that within portfolios. And it's important about some of these attributes here from the ones that come out of the box or the custom ones. You can use it as part of the ranking rules. So as you're going inside the waterline view, you can use some of these attributes as sort of driving those ranking rules. So you have a lot of investments that you want to come by, but you want to rank it under certain criteria or weighting. You can use these custom attributes. So it's not only for visibility and status, you can use it as part of using the ranking rules as well. With that, maybe take I want to take a look at some of the questions real quick. With that, it says, I want to take a look at some of the questions. One of the questions is, does that modify the end sequence when you modify the portlet? Well, let me come back with this. I was hoping to take a look at some of the questions. I'll come back at the end after covering the slides. So let's cover some of the system data providers. Hopefully that answers that question. As we mentioned, we have the new data providers, and there's 5 new ones, and we mentioned as part of the screen. Part of it, I think, like the portfolio provider has that investment aggregate data. So as I mentioned before, it's not. It shows the investment data that's in log for the life of the investment. And we use these a lot as part of our PMO accelerator. And you want to find, what are those attributes as part of the data provider that has that investment aggregate data, is to look at this, there's a suffix called, parentheses total. And I'll show you a screenshot on how it looks. Those have that investment aggregate data that you can use. And it's not kind of clipped by the portfolio start date. So if you understand portfolio, your start and your finish date, your totals are clipped by those start and finish date. But these the ones with the investment aggregate totals, they're not clipped. And we'll show you how they're going. And also, too, the chart grouping, also key for these system data providers. They're also enable with chart grouping. Here's a screenshot of what to look for for those investment aggregate totals. They have that suffix of total as part of the data provider. So going there, some of the things you want to look at, you want to utilize past those particular attributes as part of your configuration of your charts and portlets. Here's where I want to kind of highlight where you want to define your chart grouping. So, for example, what we added is this new field. If you can see it here, it's called group by column. And it allows you to utilize a particular data provider or any that you have and use it in many different ways just by changing the grouping, the group by column in the configuration. So one example that we have is this for chart grouping is this investment analysis page, and where these are 4 different portlets, but they're using the same data provider, but they're taking counts based on different groupings. So there's a count by type, a count by work status, a count by waterline, and a count by approval. One thing to note is just one data provider, no NSQL, and the same data provider is just having different group by counts. So it'll help you, when you're making the different portlets, or that you don't have to go to NSQL. A lot of that data is already provided as part of those data providers that we got out of the box. So with that, maybe we start now kind of go in with some of the questions. Dave, you want to have kind of see any questions that you see that are cover the questions area?
Yeah, I think we've had a number come in by text. So I think maybe we can start with these and then take in the voice questions as they come in. Okay. So one of the first ones is, does this work across portfolios or on just one portfolio? I think they're talking about the waterline there.
I'm not sure if it's the water. So the waterline view, well, the waterline view is per portfolio. That is for portfolio, but you have the ability to look across different portfolios through some of the data providers that we just mentioned. Also, for reporting that way. So, but the waterline itself is specific for portfolios.
Okay. So another one, I think this, this sums up some people's thoughts on this, but it says, yikes, we're on 13.1 today. Does this mean we need to rebuild our portfolios in 13.2? And I think you've talked about this, but maybe we could answer it directly.
Yes. So, so for 13.2, we re-architected, from the ground up the portfolios. Now, the data that you have inside 13.1 will still be there, but we took a totally different way of thinking it. So, and what our thought is that, yeah, you will need to rebuild it inside 13.2, but a lot of it, and to help you get there, we did with the portfolios, but also too as part of your portfolio planning. Usually, build it and have a new target in either do your fiscal year or you may have it longer out. So for that, it will need to be rebuilt for 13.2, but there's so much more benefit what we've done and what we've added, and the different architecture. I think it's and the improvements from the data providers. We feel it's definitely well worth it to move that. Unfortunately, we couldn't really, map it upgrade-wise from pre-13.2 to 13.2, given the changes in what we had to do.
Right, and that gets towards the point that we were making at the beginning of the call, which is when we looked at the real value we want to bring to this, there wasn't an easy path to get there from our current portfolios, and so we made the hard decision to rewrite it, and that is a reality in terms of how you would move to it. Okay. So this is kind of a more detailed question. Does that modify the NSQL when you modify the portlet? Modify the NSQL when you modify the.
Maybe I need to understand maybe some of the context there. You still be able to do NSQL within the portfolios in 13.2. But before you go there, I would definitely highly recommend going to looking at the out-of-the-box data providers, because we did a lot of work with them, and I think the goal is that you won't, when we built it, is you won't need to go down to the NSQL level to do a lot of that, getting all your charts and reports done. Yes.
Bill, I think that question was in reference to your slide about changes, and in particular the decommission of the portfolio and SQL, or investment SQL, I'm sorry.
Investment, okay, so they're wondering if it's removed on upgrade, or do we, right now, in general, the investment underscore SQL will not work in 13.2.
Yeah, it's removed on upgrade.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So another question is.
I would just add to that. While Bill's saying we encourage you to use the data providers, and we've put a lot of work in to make those data providers a lot more relevant than they were in prior releases. As far as queries go, the NSQL query isn't there, but as Bill explained, we're copying the data, the investment data, to portfolios now. So you can write NSQL queries on portfolio data. It's just you have to write it against the data model now, which is that copy of data. There's not this at investment SQL tag that you use. Quite honestly, that's an improvement because you get visibility into what the data is. So if you do want to go the query route or need to go the query route, you can write queries against the portfolio data.
Okay. All right, so next question that was texted in is, are the licenses of the PMO accelerator included in the normal Clarity license, or do you have to buy them separately?
Are the licenses, can you repeat that again? I'm sorry,
are the licenses of the PMO accelerator, are they included in the normal Clarity license, or do you have to buy that separate?
No, they come with the product. because it's down. It's part of Clarity.
Okay.
It's no charge for it.
And a separate question on PMO Accelerator. It looks like is that a separate install or is it packaged with the standard installer?
It's a separate install that you have to go and download from the site. Download from
the add-ins starting in the 13.2 release are packaged as part of the Clarity install. So it comes with the release, but there's a separate command that you have to run in order to install the add-ins. The installation guide has that information, so there aren't separate downloads. You don't have to download the add-ins any longer from support, but it is a separate install command you have to run.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise.
Okay, so this is one about stakeholders. Are stakeholders a new object in 13.2?
No, it's just an attribute defined as part of the properties to help, instead of working at the rights level, at a higher level, instead of, look at it, who's going to be part of it in terms of the, the stakeholder or the manager involved. So I think it's not a new object. So it's an attribute you assign to the resources in terms of who you want to have viewed to the portfolio.
Okay. Next one is, once we migrate charge code to cost type, how do we need to ensure both are in sync, or do we ensure we use only one field in all screens?
Denise, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I will. What you should do is you should migrate away from using charge code for capital and operating and move toward using cost type for capital operating. You shouldn't use both. So there should be a migration effort where you move to using cost type. There is a job that we deliver with 13.2 that allows you to map your charge codes to the new cost type fields, and it allows you to update your cost plan data and your project WBS data and your actual transactional data. The job will update all that data basically with the new cost type attribute, and then the idea is to start using that attribute. The consideration that you'd have is if you had any custom integrations where you used charge code, or you had any custom reports where you used charge code, you would need to redo those to use cost type, but our recommendation is to use cost type for capital and operating. And use charge code for something else. It now becomes another field available to you, but we don't recommend using it for capital and operating moving forward. Now, if you need to, like if you want to upgrade and use it for a release or so, I mean, you can do that, but the functionality in portfolios won't work for you if you don't move to using cost type.
Okay, good. Okay, next one is, do the portfolio system data providers pull data from the data mart tables as well as the standard tables?
No, they don't. They pull data from the new portfolio investment tables. They don't reference the data mart.
Okay. Another question is, are there any changes to the efficient frontier functionality?
Bill, do you want me to take that?
Yeah, why don't you take that one?
The efficient frontier functionality for now is not in this release. I know product management is considering that for a future release, but when we did the rewrite, that was one of the items that we didn't tackle yet.
Okay. Bill, anything more you wanted to add to that one?
Yeah, I think that's one of the items, curious on getting the feedback of, how people were using in terms of efficient frontiers. One of the items, that didn't get as far as 13.2, and I think we also have an idea out there people that voted on, so giving some other things for portfolios. So definitely vote on that one. We're gauging that in terms of the party to get that in. So definitely, if you're interested, please vote on it from the idea side, or give me your feedback on how you're using it as well.
Bill, you might want to also notice that with the enhanced portfolio attributes, the efficient frontier algorithm has enhanced data to work with, and those who are looking at evaluating it might want to share their thoughts on how and whether that would improve the functionality and usefulness of efficient frontier.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I'd like to get some other feedback given some of the kind of feedback on how they used it, but also too in conjunction with some of the new functionality. Definitely, good point.
Okay, so next question looks like, does the replacement BO investments universe have a class for the new portfolio structure?
Denise, you want to take that one? I don't think there's any updates to the
yeah, the new portfolio functionality hasn't been added to the universes. The old portfolio functionality was removed, but the new functionality hasn't been added yet. That is something that we're looking to do.
Okay. And then here's a question from Marty. He reached out by email before the call, so we should make sure we answer his question. So his question is, if you have a number of portfolios in pre-13.2, what exactly do you have to do to get those in 13.2, firstly in an upgrade, and second from a 13.1 to a separate 13.2?
Well, I think the question is, well, maybe what do you want to move over as part of it? I think is it just, I mean, we'll still keep the existing tables out there for that data, but right now there's no real upgrade path for it. So maybe the question is, what do you want to bring up from the 13.1 portfolios to 13.2, and that way. I know we have some from, maybe there's some areas within services who work with, some areas around there's certain data you can bring over, but I think maybe it's hard to say. It depends on what you want to bring over into 13.2, because not necessarily one-to-one mapping per se around there. So, and then maybe something offline or maybe some other detail that you have, because I'm not sure if you had anything else to add there, Denise, with that, because it's really not necessarily one-to-one mapping.
Right. I don't. As far as the portfolios pre-13.2, you had the ability to create the portfolio and you define the contents, but the actual physical data of all the investments was just real-time data. So as far as the migration of portfolios goes, it's really about your portfolios that are set up and your contents that are defined. We don't have a migration for that out of box with the product. I believe services has done something. But the way it would have to work is that the expectation is that you decide what portfolios you wanted to create on the new release, and it would be a manual effort to create those portfolios. Most customers are just taking the portfolios that they're carrying forward to the next year, and that's what they're creating when they upgrade to 13.2. As far as any custom portlets that you might have created, those are going to have to need to be redone. The other side of it is the portlet side of it. Those would need to be redone now because the paradigm has changed, and you'd have to recreate those using the providers instead of what you used previously.
Thanks. But using providers will be a lot easier in terms of recreating if you did a lot of stuff in the NSQL level. So.
Correct. And as Bill said, it's just not a one-to-one mapping. The migration effort and how it would have worked would have been really difficult to figure out because there isn't a strict one-to-one mapping. And with the changing of the providers and the fact we're copying data to allow editability, we just thought that the editability of the data and the waterline feature and the dragging and dropping functionality, the cost of that is that we couldn't do a fluid migration. So there is some manual migration effort required.
Okay. All right, next question is, for the additional tabs in the portfolio, do you need a separate PMO Accelerator add-in? And if so, where do you get it?
Right, I think we answered, I think we answered that before. The PMO Accelerator is part of the Clarity install. It's just a separate command to install it, and those portlet tabs are part of the PMO.
Okay, so those tabs come from that accelerator.
Right, right. And on the, if you're not familiar with the PMO Accelerator, another thing I should point out to you is that there is a product guide and there are release notes for the PMO Accelerator. So if you are going to install that, then you definitely want to go to support and download the product guide and download the release notes.
Okay. All right. Is there a maximum number of investments that can be included in a portfolio?
Yes, currently 250, and we're, right now that's the limit right now. I think the maximum roles right now is 20. So, that's the current maximum right now.
Okay. Okay. So this one says, it's clear we need to rebuild portfolio. How about the data changes in project investment object? Do we need to train our project managers as well to fill any new data fields to show the information in portfolios in 13.2, 13.3?
Data changes as far
as the resource data goes, it's the same. The resource data, when you're looking at demand in portfolios for resources for roles, it's driven by team allocations, and that's the same in 13.2. So that's the same data that you would fill out. The cost plan data prior to 13.2, if you had the PMO Accelerator installed, we had portlets where we looked at capital and operating costs, and they were based on cost plans using the charge code of capital and expense. That has changed now in 13.2. So if you're tracking capital and operating costs, there's a new cost type field. And if you do cost plans, you would need to do your cost plans with that cost type field. A really great addition also to 13.2 is that you no longer have to do detailed cost plans to track capital and operating. On the project properties and on the investment properties is actually a new capital cost field and an operating cost field. So if you want to just do a high-level budget instead of a detailed cost plan and see capital and operating in portfolios, you can do that. And those fields are available across all investment types. So the capital and operating, there's some consideration and some changes there. There's really not for resource allocations. As far as the other fields go, any custom fields you might have or the fields that Bill talked about, alignment and risk, those all work the same. Things that you'd be filling out today that go to portfolios would go to portfolios in the new release. There is one step you have to do. You have to register the attributes. So there's a new portfolio investment object in the release, and there's a tab on that object where you register the attributes for portfolios. So you'll have to do that step, but that's the only thing you have to do, and your attributes will all be in portfolios. I think that kind of covers it.
Yeah. It should.
Okay.
Okay, so another question here is it possible to shift the projects around on the timeline within the plans? In other words, to make a project start later and see the impact on the portfolio?
Well, within the targets, it's still more the
yes. If you're going to do what ifing in a plan, similar to how scenarios worked before, you can change the start date and it'll push out the plan costs. That works similarly. But you can also, if you actually want to edit planned cost by period in portfolios now, you can do that as well. But yes, when you shift the start date, it'll shift your cost of your investments.
Okay. The next one, and this might be one I need to answer since looks like I caused the question. So are the iPad features you displayed available on SaaS on demand for 13.2? So I should clarify that. What I was showing there from the iPad, that is the Clarity Playbook, which is essentially it's a separate product that works with Clarity. I showed it because I wanted to show overall where we're going in a direction to make the Clarity solution more strategic and help connect with that executive level audience and really drive business plans. So to be clear, that isn't a part of Clarity 13.2 or portfolios. It's a separate product that you would purchase, and that also is a SaaS product that we have. So that is the Clarity Playbook product. Let's see. The next one is, has detailed training been developed for portfolios in 13.2? Has detailed training been developed? I guess the question is do we have detailed training that we have available on using the 13.2 portfolios?
There's training developed for that 13.2 portfolio, so and it's available, for it. So I think it's we can send that information out to you for that. So that is available from from an LMS site, so it is available.
Okay. Here's another question about charge codes. Do we need to make changes to all other setups to remove reference to charge code, or does the job remove the reference? I understand about custom code change required.
Yeah, we don't delete your data, so we will not delete any charge code references that you have, but there's no harm in leaving those references there. So if you categorize things with capital and expense charge codes, there's no harm in leaving that there. Our migration job just simply sets the new cost type attribute based on how you map charge code to cost type in the job. You'll say these charge codes equal this cost type. And so we just set cost type. We do not modify your charge code data.
Okay. A follow-up question on this then. What is the typical effort involved to remove reference charge code?
I guess my first question would be why you'd want to remove it versus just inactivating the charge codes you're not using anymore, create new charge codes for whatever you want to use it for from now on, and then update from that point forward. I'd have to understand why they were interested in removing all the references to charge code. There are some places where, you have actual transactions. The charge code carries through with actual financial transactions, so you're not going to remove it from there unless you go through and do a bunch of WIP adjustments, which you don't want to do. I wouldn't recommend doing that. The other places that you have charge codes, it depends where you use it. But as far as deleting the references, I would just probably question why you do that versus just repurposing it for whatever you're going to use it for, and then just change your projects and your WBS from that point forward.
Okay. Here's one that says, basically, if you're converting ideas to projects in 13.2, does all of the data roll over, meaning resources, roles, and financials? Does all of that convert when you're rolling in ideas into projects?
That's something that we're working on for the 13.3 release. The cost plans don't exist on ideas prior to 13.2, but or in 13.2, but that's a new feature in 13.3. So with 13.3, you want to handle that, Bill?
Yeah, and
okay.
We're working on having that, the ability to copy cost plans from the creation of cost plans and ideas, but also copying that over to the project. Now, note, I think as part of the copy, we will we'll cover some more of the detail of that in our upcoming end of sprint demo. So you may want to come up later to see how the progress is going for that area. But right now, we're working on financial plans and ideas now, and having that data as a copy that cost plan data over to the product.
Now, the other question was related to the team, and the answer to that is we're not copying the team.
For now, we're not going to be copying the team data over to the project. So there are some caveats related on when the cost plan will be copied over to the project. Essentially, right now is that if you create the cost plan manually, you'll be able to copy that on conversion, or copy the cost, convert the copy the cost plan over to the project. If we create that on the idea via the instant by team, we create the cost plan. Since we're not bringing over the team, we can't bring over the cost plan. So one of the areas we can get in for 13.3, but it's something we're looking at post 13.3.
Okay. Here's a question. I'm not sure if we have enough context of it. But it says, is investment info refreshed in existing portfolios?
I assume they're talking about the sync job, with that. So one thing, that's one I didn't cover too much as part. So right now, there's that sync job, which gets the information from the investment tables and push it inside the portfolio. You can do that manually and kind of click it in, or you can schedule it. How often do you want to bring in those investment totals inside the portfolio? So you can be scheduled, or it can be done like on demand or manually as you do the syncing from the investments to the portfolio.
Okay. Here's a question. It looks like it's kind of a broad question about trying to understand better the shift from charge code, meaning capital expense, to cost type of capital and operating, and how that impacts portfolio views and reporting. Could you maybe just talk a bit more about that shift from charge code to cost type?
Denise, you like that one? If you can sort
of
light.
Yeah. So part of the reason that we went with the shift to cost type is because charge code was really never intended to be used for capital and operating. What happened in implementations is that customers did end up using that field, charge code, to do capital and operating, because the way it works nicely for that, meaning that you can set the charge code on an investment and you can set the charge code down the WBS in your WBS structure. So because of that, a lot of customers use charge code. However, there were some holes in the charge code functionality because, like I said, it wasn't really designed for capital and operating. One of those holes was you could put the charge code on a timesheet, and you could edit that charge code on a timesheet. And that's a big no-no if you're doing capitalization. You don't want your end users entering timesheets being able to change your capitalization rules. So there was that hole, and then the other hole was in the schedulers and the Microsoft Project and Open Workbench. You could edit that field, and a lot of times financial folks wanted to set it and not have it be editable in the project plans. So both of those with cost type are restricted. So because of that, right, we introduced a new attribute. Now you can't change cost type on a timesheet or in the schedulers. There's a right that you have to grant in order to be able to do that in the schedulers. So that was the big driver for not doing it with charge code and using cost type. We also added functionality with cost type where we added a capitalization % on the team. So you can actually use a capitalization % on the team so that if you build cost plans from the team, you get a capitalization. It'll go into the cost type, capital or operating, based on what the capitalization is of the team member. That's for planning. So if you don't have a full WBS but you've allocated team members and you want to create a cost plan from that team and see capital and operating, you can do that without doing a full-blown WBS. So those are the main reasons why we changed to cost type. The reports that we ship out of box, we ship in the Clarity Solution Pack, and starting with 13.2, those reports now reference cost type instead of charge code. We had some reports in the past that used charge code, and we've switched them to be cost type in the 13.2 release to go along with the new functionality. But those are the main drivers for why we implemented cost type. We wanted a formal field that said this is capital or this is operating. And then we tied all of that to our portfolio functionality.
Okay. Before we go on the next question, I wanted to check on time. Karen and Jeff, I know we have more time on the call, but we've got a lot more questions here to go through. Do you want us to stop at some point to let you talk about something else on the call, or should we just keep going with the Q&A?
Oh, no, why don't you keep going? I think this is a great interaction.
Okay. All right. Great. So then the next question we have is, do benefits attributes accommodate non-financial benefits?
You want to take that one, Denise?
I will. At this point, the benefit plan functionality is similar to what it has been, and our benefit plans are financial benefit plans. That is the tracking of non-financial benefits is definitely something we've heard from our customer base, and I know something that product management is reviewing as part of the playbook, the Clarity Playbook product and the Clarity product, the need to track non-financial benefits. For now in Clarity in this release, the benefits are similar to how they've been in prior releases, and they are financial benefits.
You can, some clients do, however, use the customizable facility in the portfolio to identify other attributes. So it is possible to set up an attribute and use it in the portfolio, if I'm correct, that you might use as a ranking. Is that correct?
Right. I was talking about for non-financial benefits. We've heard the request where folks want to enter in non-financial benefits with their targets by period for those non-financial benefits, and then how they're tracking to realizing those benefits by period. So that functionality is a more advanced topic and not something that we're doing yet in the product. But as he said, you can definitely do like ranking and do attributes and that type of benefit measurement. And we do have customers doing that don't care about the time phase aspect of it.
Okay. Okay, so this question I think is, so after you've upgraded to 13.2, or right after you've upgraded, can you view the pre-13.2 portfolios in 13.2 after you've upgraded?
No, you can't. I think it's, since it's a different architecture as part of it. So the data and tables are still there for 13.1, but there's no way of actually going in. And if you kind of want to create a portlet against those to read that data, you can, for your own historical purposes there. But no, not within the 13.2 portfolio screens. You can't see 13.1 portfolios.
Yeah, because I think what he's getting at is, before you go about rebuilding, do you have something to see there? But it sounds like, you'll see some data, but then you go about rebuilding.
Yeah, most customers will leave a server, a test, or a dev box on a prior release and do a copy of prod before the upgrade and put it on the prior release on a test or dev box and then reference that box to do the new portfolio setup. The reason that everything's deleted is because we didn't want customers to have to go through and delete everything. There were a lot of portlets and queries and lookups and instances. We didn't want that to be a manual effort to delete all of that. So we figured that customers would reference just another server, basically, a copy of their prod pre-upgrade, and use that to do if they needed a reference point.
Okay. Next question is just a housekeeping one about the presentation. Will the presentation be available on the CA site? Yeah, I think that's the case. I think, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're recording this, and then I think Chris Hackett will be posting the recording of this to the community page. Chris, can you confirm that?
Yeah, I think the question is, will the presentation be available for download? The recording is always posted.
Oh, the slides. Yeah, okay, yeah, I wasn't seeing it that way.
Well, we had that asked earlier, but yeah, the recording will definitely be there, but we're going to have people ask about the presentation.
Yeah, I don't know. That part we may have to, I'm going to have to hedge on that one. So we'll definitely have the recording up, and then we'll check to see if we can post the slides. I'm not sure about that one. I think we may just do the recording. Okay, so next question is, will all portfolio data be available to report on or export to Excel, PowerPoint, or Word?
With some of the portlets that you buy from the data provider, take that back. To some areas within and correct me if I'm wrong, there's the needs like the waterline can't be exported from there. But a lot of the data within the portfolio, the PMO accelerator, some of the portlets and charts are there, can be exported. But there are some targets and waterline can't be exported.
Okay. And will portfolio data be available through the data analytics data mart?
Not inside the data mart. As mentioned, you get some of the data from the portfolio data providers, and I think we're looking at more and trying to get more of that data into more of a reporting aspect kind of in the future. But that's looking long term. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're talking probably about the global delivery analytic product.
That one. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be a question for global delivery. I don't think they put anything in this release, but I think they're probably doing the same thing we're doing with universes, and that is, the first release goes by, and then we're going to work on adding it in a post release.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, the intention here, right, is we have a new portfolio data model. Our reporting offerings need to support that.
Okay. Next question says, does it pull in child investments automatically?
I think do you want to check that one? It doesn't take the child investment.
Yeah, it works similar to it did in prior releases. The amounts of the child investments are included in the parent that's brought into the portfolio, but it doesn't implicitly add the children. So when you add a parent investment to the portfolio, the cost that's represented in the portfolio is the cost of that parent and its children per the allocation hierarchy. But the individual children aren't displayed in the, or aren't added to the portfolio. So that functionality is the same paradigm as it was pre-13.2.
Okay. The next one is, we have a custom-built financial interface between Clarity and Oracle, and we exploit capital and O&M down to the expenditure type level in 13.1. My gut says we may need to re-architect the interface based on the 13.2 cost shell. Does that sound right?
Yeah, correct. That was what I mentioned when I was talking about cost type. I said when the things to consider is if you have any custom reports or if you have any integrations, that you would have to consider those. So yes, if you're using charge code in the integration, you'd have to change that to be cost type. The good thing is that the cost type model is similar to charge code. For example, I think this example was they were exporting financial transactions. So if that's the case, the charge code is an attribute in the financial transaction table, and so is cost type. So it's just a matter of saying use cost type now. It's in the same table. It's not going to be more complicated to use cost type, I guess, is my point. But you will have to change integrations.
Okay. Next one is, can the rank value or attribute be accessed in a query to be pulled into a report? And if so, what table is that located on?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Bill, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I would say yeah. I guess as part of it, I think it's.
I'm joking. I don't know the table. I don't know the table off the top of my head, but it's definitely stored in the table. Yeah, it's definitely queryable. We have a report that actually shows. There's a report we deliver in the Clarity Solution Pack. That's a portfolio comparison report. And that report is a good example to look at if you are interested in finding out some about the data model. Then you can find out what the ranking table is there. It's not hard to figure out. When you look at the data model, it's a mirror of the Clarity data model. So if you're familiar with the Clarity data model, it'll be pretty easy to ramp up on the portfolio data model. It's literally a copy of the tables. It's just the table names are preferenced with PFM for portfolios, but the ranking number is just in one of those tables.
Okay. All right. Next question is, what job is used to update charge codes and cost types?
Capitalization. I think it was part of the slides. I think it was when I talked about the areas of cost, about the whole charge code and cost type. So enable capitalization.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's documented in the administration guide. So there are definitely, you want to review the full impacts of that by reviewing the Clarity administration guide.
And also because it gives some information as well as to other impact, and check the change impact guide for 13.2.
Okay. This question is, where are the plans stored? Can you report on plans for historical reporting and compare, say, 1 month against another month?
I don't necessarily know the table where it's stored, but well, part of it, there's an investment data provider for specific plans that you can do reporting from there. But I'm not sure anything else to add with that, Denise, because there's some other content as well related to plans.
Right. So the plans aren't really intended to be a historical snapshot, if you will, because the plans are updated when you do a sync. So the way it works is when you create a portfolio and you create plans, when you sync the portfolio the next time, it'll update the amounts in the plans and in the portfolio for the, for what they are in the real investments, except for amounts that you've edited or changed in the plan. So if you've gone into a plan, for example, and changed your alignments or changed your risk or changed status or changed some attribute, we won't overwrite your change, but that's the only thing we preserve. We just preserve things you've changed in a plan. We don't overwrite those, but any other data related to the investment in the plan, we would update to match what it is in real clarity at the time you sync. So the plans aren't intended to be those historical snapshots. They're not intended to be a historical snapshot.
Okay. Our next question is, can you create a portfolio of ideas and do what-if planning on that?
Yes. You do that in 13.2 correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, you can, as part of it, I mean, though we're working on 13.3 more of the cost plan and ideas, you can still do it as your, kind of simple budget-wise on the investment and also to the team data. So yeah, so it does bring it up from the ideas.
Right, and the idea has I've mentioned there's a capital cost and an operating cost field just on the properties page now for budgeting. That the idea has the capital and the operating cost fields, just like all the other investment types. That's on the ideas too, and that's in 13.2. It's the detailed cost plans on ideas that's in 13.3.
Okay. Next question is around, are there any known bugs or issues in 13.2 portfolios? It'd be good to know what those are to avoid surprises. I think that's an easy one to answer. I think it's completely bug-free, right, Bill?
Yeah. We're looking at providing kind of, just in general, this is not just portfolios, more, visibility of bugs around there. So we're looking with support and, with known bug lists and stuff like that. So, but it's,
Dave, Dave, we're coming to a stopping point in a couple of minutes. I think you've got several more questions. Maybe you should suggest how those folks can get to you offline and follow up.
Hey, Dave, this is Chris. Actually, I have a suggestion. If the folks that still have questions, either on the phone or online here, would just go and post on the message board in the general discussion for the Clarity community site, which everyone will be taken to as soon as they leave the WebEx, so that'll make it easy for them. Then you can probably check those questions out there, and they'll also be available for everyone else as well in the community.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And then from there, Denise and Bill and myself, we can look through those today and respond to those. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. In fact, that's probably good. I'm glad you spoke up, Jeff, because one thing I wanted to do, there's a slide that I had right before the thank you slide. Bill, if you don't mind moving to it, that had more information on there. I wanted to point people to that. Yeah, that one there. So there's a couple of different places to go to get more information on this. And, one is of course, the documentation set that you've heard references to that, throughout this presentation. So, if you go to the CA.com, support.ca.com, go to the bookshelf, you'll be able to read through the 13.2 documentation we have. But we also have a number of, more marketing-oriented materials that would also help you to get a high level of the value of portfolios. So if you go to CA.com, we have a solution brief, we have a functional overview guide. We also did a webcast on our Bright Talk channel on what's new in 13.2, and we went into a lot of detail on that on how you would use the new portfolios. So I wanted to point you to those places to get more information, and then I think like Chris just said, go to the community site and please post any questions, and we'll go through and answer those. But I guess what I'm thinking, Karen, is maybe we can hand this back to you to wrap up here in the last few minutes and add in anything more that you wanted to add. Karen or Jeff, you might be on mute.
Karen, are you on mute?
Hey, it's Karen. I apologize. I was on mute. Still can't figure that button out. I'd like to thank you all from the CA team for joining today and providing this overview. It was as interactive as one could hope, and I really appreciate the attendees joining in and the CA team. Thank you so much. And as Chris noted earlier, please post any questions that haven't been answered out on the message board. We'll get answers out to you in a very quick fashion. The guys are great about responding. And also, just a very quick reminder, there's a poll that has appeared out on the website, out on the WebEx site, that is a question about rating today's webcast. I appreciate anyone responding honestly and giving us feedback. It would be greatly appreciated. It's the best way that we can improve, just by getting your feedback, and thank you very much for doing that. And then finally, just a quick housekeeping update. Anyone that is interested in presenting, we certainly would love to hear from you. We are dependent upon our teams and our attendees, our members of this community, to be a part. And the message we received during the last elections was we wanted to hear more from the community members. Well, that's only possible if the community members volunteer, so we really would love to hear from you. And then finally, we had 200 folks attend today, which I think is great. And I thank you all. Do not forget to vote. And again, thank you to the CA team and to the board for participating in this. It is greatly appreciated, and we look forward to talking to you in the winter webcast, which will be in December of this year. Thank you all very much. Please take care.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's call. You may now disconnect.